The road home should have been the safest place in the world. On a chilly October afternoon in 2007, 14-year-old Nicole Summers stepped off her school bus on County Road 39, in the quiet farming town of Ashcroft County. It was a walk she'd made hundreds of times, less than a quarter-mile to her family's farmhouse. But on that day, she never made it home. No witnesses. No signs of a struggle. Just open farmland, fading sunlight, and a silence that would stretch on for years. Her backpack turned up days later in a drainage ditch. Her phone, dead within minutes of leaving the bus. As police scoured the cornfields and neighbors joined the search, whispers began to spread. A faded blue work van. A friend's mysterious 911 call. And a confession that came far too late. What happened to Nicole Summers? This is not a story about monsters hiding in the dark. It's about how darkness can grow quietly, in the places we trust most. Before we begin, if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every day, we uncover the stories that keep small towns awake at night. Now, let's go back to where it all began, the moment Nicole Summers vanished. The wind moved through the corn that afternoon like it had something to say, low, restless, and full of secrets. It was October 19, 2007, and in Merrow Creek County, Ohio, the sky looked bruised, heavy with a storm that never quite came. The smell of wet earth hung in the air, mixing with the smoke of distant burn piles. At 4:47 p.m., a yellow school bus rattled down County Road 58, brakes squealing as it came to a stop near Maple Hollow Drive. The driver, a man named Jerry Latham, pulled the lever and the doors folded open with a sigh. The last passenger stepped off, 14-year-old Nicole Summers. She waved politely to Jerry, adjusted her denim jacket against the cold, and started down the narrow gravel road toward home. A walk she'd done hundreds of times. A walk that should have taken her less than 12 minutes. She never made it. Nicole was one of those kids everyone liked, quiet, kind, always smiling just a little too shyly for photos. She lived with her parents and younger brother in a farmhouse surrounded by soybean fields and low fences that hadn't seen fresh paint in years. Her life was simple, predictable. And that's exactly what made what happened next so terrifying. That Friday afternoon had been ordinary: math quiz at school, lunch with friends, quick band practice before the final bell. Nicole texted her mom that she was heading home. Then, nothing. No calls. No messages. No trace. At 4:52 p.m., her flip phone sent its final signal to a nearby tower, 5 minutes after she stepped off the bus. Then the signal cut out completely, as if the world had swallowed her whole. The road she walked was open and flat, fields stretching half a mile on each side. You could see everything from there: tractors, passing cars, even stray dogs wandering from farm to farm. There were no forests, no alleys, no abandoned barns. If someone had stopped their vehicle, anyone nearby would have seen it. But no one did. The bus driver later told investigators something strange. He said, "I always check my mirror after every stop. She was there, walking, like normal. Then I turned the corner. 30 seconds later, gone. Just gone." No one heard a scream. No one saw a struggle. And when her mother, Diane Summers, looked out from the kitchen window 20 minutes later, all she saw was an empty road. By 5 p.m., Nicole should have been home, dropping her backpack in the hallway and heading straight for the cookie jar her mom pretended not to notice. By 5:15, her mom's unease grew into panic. By 5:30, her father, Tom Summers, was in his pickup, driving down County Road 58, calling her name out the window. He drove the entire route twice. Nothing. The road was deserted, not even tire marks, not even a footprint. At 6:15 p.m., they called the sheriff's office. And by nightfall, patrol cars were crawling through Merrow Creek with flashing lights slicing through the dark. Neighbors poured out of their homes with flashlights and ATVs, searching every ditch and field. The sound of her name echoed across the farmland, carried away by the wind. But the fields gave nothing back. 3 days later, on October 22nd, a farmer checking his irrigation line found something caught in a drainage ditch 2 miles away from the bus stop. A navy blue backpack, soaked, half buried in mud. Nicole's name was written across the front pocket in silver marker. Inside were ruined textbooks, a pencil case shaped like a cat, and a crushed granola bar. No phone. No wallet. No clue how it got there. What chilled investigators wasn't what was inside the bag, but where it was found. 2 miles in the opposite direction from where Nicole was walking. That meant someone had taken it there. Sheriff Bill Mercer, a 26-year department veteran, said later that this was the moment he knew they weren't dealing with a runaway. This wasn't a lost kid, he said. This was an abduction. Someone out there knew exactly what they were doing. The following morning, K-9 units from Columbus were brought in. The dogs tracked Nicole scent along the road for about 40 yards before it stopped, right in the middle of the lane. The handler said, when the scent cuts off like that, it usually means one thing: the person got into a vehicle. But whose? That's when an elderly neighbor, Margaret Calloway, came forward. She said she'd seen a faded blue work van driving unusually slow near the intersection around the same time Nicole stepped off the bus. She hadn't seen who was inside. She hadn't heard anything odd. Just a van, moving slow, then gone. No plate number. No distinguishing marks. The lead went nowhere. Back then, Merrill Creek County was the kind of place that didn't believe in real monsters. But after Nicole disappeared, people started locking their doors. Parents began driving their kids to school. And at night, the road where Nicole vanished stayed unervingly quiet, as if even the wind remembered what happened there. 16 years later, the corn still grows high around County Road 58. The bus still passes the same stop. But to this day, no one has ever explained what happened in those missing 12 minutes between 4:47 and 4:59 p.m. 12 minutes. That's all it took for a girl to vanish into thin air. And as the sun sank that night over Merrow Creek, one question hung in the air, a question no one's been able to answer since. How does someone disappear in plain sight? By the time the last light faded over Merrow Creek County, the Summers farmhouse looked like a beacon on an empty ocean. Every window glowed. Every porch bulb burned. And inside, Nicole's mother, Diane, was still standing at the kitchen sink, hands trembling, phone clutched tight, staring out at the dark road that should have carried her daughter home. She kept expecting to see a shadow appear, a shape, a backpack, anything. But the road stayed empty. At 6:12 p.m., she called 911 again. Her voice was shaking. Something's wrong. My daughter's missing. She should have been home 2 hours ago. Within 30 minutes, a cruiser from the Merrow Creek Sheriff's Department pulled into the gravel drive. Deputy Rhonda Klein stepped out, her radio crackling with static, eyes scanning the fields already swallowed by night. Inside, Diane kept glancing at the kitchen clock. Each tick felt louder than the last. Her husband, Tom, paced the hallway, boots still covered in dust from the fields where he'd searched on foot until the dark made it impossible to see. On the table sat Nicole's favorite mug, half full of cold cocoa from that morning. Beside it, a folded math worksheet she'd been proud of. The kind of little things that scream normal life, until suddenly they don't. Klein took notes quietly, her face tightening with each answer. When did she get off the bus? 4:45. When did you last talk to her? Right before she got on. She said she'd be home soon. The deputy looked toward the door. We'll find her. Kids wander off sometimes. But even as she said it, she didn't sound convinced. By 8 p.m., squad cars lined County Road 58. Their headlights swept the fields like searchlights in an old war movie. Dozens of neighbors joined the search, farmers, teenagers, even the local pastor, all carrying flashlights that cut thin lines through the fog. They called Nicole's name over and over. Nicole. Nicole, honey. No reply. Just the rhythmic hum of crickets, and the distant drone of a generator somewhere across the valley. One of the volunteers found a single sneaker print near a culvert, but the rain had already softened it. Too blurred to match. Too fragile to mean anything solid. At 9:45 p.m., a K-9 unit arrived from the next county. The dogs picked up her scent near the bus stop. Then, just as before, it vanished in the middle of the road. No trail toward home. No trace into the fields. It was like someone had picked her up and erased the ground behind them. Inside the farmhouse, Diane sat on the couch clutching Nicole's hoodie, the one she'd left on the coat rack. The smell of her daughter's shampoo still clung to it. Every knock at the door made her jump. Every headlight passing down the road made her hope. Tom refused to sleep. He drove in loops around the county until dawn, stopping at every gas station and truck stop, showing Nicole's school photo to anyone still awake. "She's 14, he'd say. "Blue eyes, brown hair, 5'3". "Have you seen her?" Most people hadn't. Some glanced away too quickly. By sunrise, he'd covered nearly 50 miles and found nothing but fog, tire tracks, and empty coffee cups. The next morning, the sheriff himself showed up, Bill Mercer, tall, calm, the kind of man small towns trusted. He stood on the Summers porch as the sun rose over the fields and said, "We're treating this as a missing person case. But we're not ruling anything out." Behind him, officers started laying out search grids on county maps. Drones weren't common back then, so it was all manpower and instinct, hundreds of acres of farmland combed on foot. Every barn, every ditch, every piece of abandoned machinery was checked. Nothing. The local news caught wind of the story that afternoon. By day 2, reporters were parked outside the Summers driveway. Microphones, cameras, flashes. The kind of attention no parent ever wants. Diane stood behind her husband during the first press briefing, face pale, eyes hollow. "Please," she said into the microphone, her voice barely a whisper. "If you know anything, anything at all, please bring our daughter home." Her words echoed through the tiny crowd. Some people cried. Others just looked away. That night, the phone rang non-stop. Psychics, prank calls, strangers claiming they'd seen a girl matching Nicole's description in gas stations 3 towns over. Every lead ended the same way, dead. On the third night, the Summers house went silent. No reporters, no search teams, just wind moving through the fields again. Tom sat by the window, staring out at the road with a shotgun across his knees, not out of rage but helplessness. He'd sworn to protect his family, and now, he couldn't even protect the memory of his daughter's footsteps fading down that gravel path. Diane left the porch light on. She told her husband she couldn't stand the dark anymore. At 11:53 p.m., just as the house was finally quiet, the family's phone rang. Tom answered. Static. Then a click. He stared at the receiver for a long time, heart pounding, before slowly hanging it back up. The number was blocked. No voicemail. No explanation. The call never traced. But for Diane, that sound, the faint broken static of a line that shouldn't have rung, was the first time she whispered what she hadn't dared say aloud all week. "Someone out there has our daughter." And just like that, the search for Nicole Summers was no longer a missing person case. It was the beginning of a nightmare that would tear Merrow Creek County apart. The morning after Nicole's disappearance, Merrow Creek County woke up differently. The air felt heavier, quieter, like the whole town was holding its breath. What began as a search for a missing teenager had shifted overnight into something darker, something no one wanted to say out loud yet, an abduction. By sunrise, the Summers farmhouse no longer looked like a home. Patrol cars lined the gravel driveway, radios crackling through the morning fog. Neighbors stood in small clusters, coffee cups trembling in their hands. Reporters hadn't arrived yet, that would come later, but the fear spreading through town was already contagious. Inside the kitchen, Sheriff Bill Mercer laid out a map of Merrow Creek County across the dining table. Red markers covered the area around County Road 47, the stretch where Nicole vanished. Beside him stood Deputy Rachel Voss, her notepad filled with phone calls, timestamps, and statements. They'd confirmed the bus driver's account. Nicole stepped off at exactly 4:47 p.m. No other passengers disembarked at that stop. No one else saw her after that. The last ping from her cell phone tower came at 4:52 p.m., less than a mile north, before it went silent forever. Then came the first real clue. At 7:23 a.m., a farmer named Earl Thompson found Nicole's backpack in a drainage ditch off Route 33, about 2 miles from the bus stop, in the opposite direction of her home. It was soaked, the zippers caked with mud. Inside were school books, a pencil case, a half-eaten granola bar. But no phone, no wallet. Sheriff Mercer examined it quietly, his jaw tightening. "She didn't drop this," he said. "Someone put it here." That single sentence changed everything. The search radius expanded from 2 miles to 5. Dozens of volunteers combed through cornfields, drainage pipes, and back roads. K-9 units from Columbus arrived by mid-morning. The dogs picked up Nicole's scent from the bus stop, but it ended abruptly in the middle of the road. Voss frowned as her German shepherd circled and barked. "It just stops here," she said. Mercer's eyes narrowed. means she got into a vehicle. That realization sent a shiver through everyone standing nearby. By noon, the Merrow Creek Sheriff's Department had activated the Ohio BCI and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Flyers went up across town. Nicole's school photo, the one with her nervous half-smile and band uniform collar slightly askew, was suddenly everywhere. At the Summers home, Diane sat at the kitchen table, the photo clutched in both hands. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her husband Tom moved mechanically, pacing between rooms as if he might open a door and find Nicole sitting there waiting. Reporters arrived by late afternoon, their vans parked along the narrow road. The first local broadcast went live at 6 p.m., framing the white farmhouse against the dusk sky. A small town in shock tonight, as 14-year-old Nicole Summers vanished just a few hundred yards from her home. The image of Diane standing in the doorway, refusing to speak, said more than any soundbite could. That night, hundreds gathered at the community church for a candlelight vigil. The same pews that held weddings and baptisms now held people whispering prayers they didn't believe would be answered. Mercer and Voss stayed on the move. They questioned everyone within a 10-mile radius. The Callahans, the Hendersons, the farmers who passed through Route 33. And then Margaret Callahan mentioned something, a small detail that had seemed unimportant before. "I saw a blue van," she said, "around 4:45, maybe closer to 4:50. Faded paint. No windows in the back. Thought it was a contractor. A van. Blue. Faded." Mercer wrote it down, his pen pressing hard enough to tear the page. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. On Sunday morning, the case broke wide open. Deputy Voss was reviewing footage from the Ridgeway Gas Mart, the only convenience store along County Road 47. At 4:41 p.m., a yellow school bus passed by on camera. At 4:49 p.m., a blue work van appeared heading in the same direction, toward the bus stop. The timestamp matched almost perfectly. Voss called Mercer over. "That's our van," she said, pointing at the grainy footage. Mercer nodded, his voice low. "Get the plate number if you can. Enhance it." But the footage was too poor to read. The sun glare washed it out completely. Still, the direction, the timing, the color, all aligned. They sent the clip to the BCI for analysis. Meanwhile, Tom Summers couldn't sit still. He joined searchers in the fields, flashlight in hand long after midnight. "She's out here somewhere," he kept saying, voice breaking. "She has to be." Diane stayed by the phone, waiting for a call that never came. She'd left the porch light on since Friday night. She wouldn't turn it off again for years. By Monday morning, national media had arrived. CNN, Dateline, even America's Most Wanted reached out for details. Tips poured in, most useless, some bizarre. People claimed to have seen Nicole in nearby towns, gas stations, even a Walmart in Kentucky. But one call, at 2:17 p.m., changed the course of the investigation. A trucker passing through Merrow Creek reported seeing a blue van pulled over near the old mill road the night of the disappearance, around 5:15 p.m. He remembered it because the driver was standing outside, smoking, staring toward the field. Mercer and Voss drove there immediately. The old mill road was desolate, dirt and gravel winding through overgrown farmland. Near the curve, about 30 yards from the road, they found flattened grass, like someone had parked or struggled there. Then, beneath a cluster of weeds, Voss noticed something glinting faintly in the sunlight. She crouched, brushed the dirt away. It was a small silver bracelet, the kind sold in teen accessory shops, engraved with the letter N. Mercer took it, silent. The initials matched Nicole's. He looked toward the endless stretch of empty field, the horizon glowing with sunset. "Whatever happened," he said, voice rough, "started here." As the wind picked up, rustling through the dry cornstalks, the scene fell into silence, heavy, suffocating silence. The kind that tells you the ground beneath your feet might be holding more than just secrets. And for the first time, Sheriff Mercer began to fear that the blue van hadn't just passed through Merrow Creek. It had chosen it. By Tuesday morning, Merrow Creek County was barely recognizable. The sleepy farming town had turned into a media circus, helicopters hovering above cornfields, reporters staking out the Summers driveway, satellite trucks clogging the narrow rural roads. For the first time in anyone's memory, fear had taken root deeper than the harvest. Inside the sheriff's office, Sheriff Bill Mercer stood over a cluttered board filled with photos, maps, and red string lines connecting locations. The gas station footage, the ditch where the backpack was found, the old mill road. Every clue pointed back to one thing: the blue van. But tracking it wasn't easy. There were dozens of faded blue vans in the Tri-County area: contractors, delivery trucks, painters, mechanics. And yet, only one name kept circling back in interviews and call-ins: Danny Cole. Danny wasn't a stranger to Marrow Creek. He'd grown up there, a quiet man in his early 40s who ran a small repair garage off Highway 22. He fixed farm equipment, welded fences, replaced carburetors. Everyone knew him as reliable, if a little withdrawn. His old blue Chevy work van had been a familiar sight on those country roads for over a decade. The same van Margaret Callahan swore she saw near the bus stop. When Mercer heard the name, he frowned. Danny Cole? He worked on my truck last spring. Deputy Voss flipped through her notepad. 2 more residents say the same. Said they saw him driving near County Road 47 on Friday. Mercer's jaw tightened. Let's talk to him. At 9:42 a.m., 2 patrol cars pulled into Cole's Auto Repair, a squat brick building with a rusted tin roof and a closed for the weekend sign still hanging crooked on the door. The blue Chevy van sat parked behind the shop, streaked with mud. Mercer approached slowly, hand resting on his belt. Danny stepped out from the side door, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. He didn't look surprised, just wary. "Morning, Sheriff," he said evenly. "What's all the commotion about?" Mercer studied him. "You've heard what's going on. The Summers girl. We're checking every vehicle that matches a certain description." Danny nodded, arms crossed. "I've already told folks I was home Friday evening. You can check my logbook. Didn't leave the shop after 4. Mind if we take a look at your van?" Mercer asked. Danny hesitated for a second too long, then shrugged. "Sure. I've got nothing to hide." The interior smelled of oil and old metal. Tools rattled in boxes, rags littered the floor. On the passenger seat sat a pack of cigarettes and a thermos. Nothing obviously out of place, until Voss crouched near the back and noticed a faint smear of mud across the rear bumper, darker than the rest. "Sheriff," she called quietly. "Fresh." Mercer's face stayed unreadable. "Mr. Cole, we'll need to bring the van in for forensic processing." Danny's expression shifted. "You can't just." "It's voluntary for now," Mercer interrupted. "Let's keep it that way." Cole clenched his jaw but didn't argue. As he watched deputies tow away his van, his hands trembled slightly, barely noticeable, but Mercer caught it. Back at the station, technicians swabbed and photographed the van for over 6 hours. Mud samples, fiber traces, fingerprints. Then, just after 5:30 p.m., a forensic officer called Mercer over to the evidence table. "Sheriff, you need to see this." Inside a small plastic bag was a single hair, long and blonde, caught in the latch of the van's back door. They sent it for DNA testing immediately. That evening, word spread faster than wildfire. By nightfall, everyone in Marrow Creek knew the name Danny Cole. Rumors filled the air. Some swore he'd been seen lurking near the Summers property. Others whispered about old accusations from years past. At the Summers home, Diane sat silent, her hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea. Tom paced the floor, rage and disbelief warring in his eyes. "I trusted that man," he said. "He's been in our house. Fixed our mower." Diane's voice cracked. "He wouldn't hurt her, would he?" Neither of them answered. Outside, cameras flashed through the darkness, reporters shouting questions. The Summers family didn't open the door. The next morning, Mercer received the call he'd been waiting for, and dreading. The DNA on the hair was a match to Nicole Summers. Within the hour, he signed the warrant. Deputies descended on Danny Cole's property, searching every inch. The van, the garage, the small house behind it. Inside the garage, near the back wall, investigators found a discarded rag soaked in what looked like oil. Tests later confirmed it was mixed with traces of blood, typo positive, matching Nicole's. They also found something else, a silver earring, small and heart-shaped. Tom confirmed it instantly. She got those for her birthday. She never took them off. Danny Cole was arrested at 3:14 p.m. He didn't resist. Just looked down and said softly, "You're making a mistake." But the story didn't end there. When interrogators pressed him, Danny's answers stayed vague. He claimed he'd found the earring in the back of his van weeks ago, thought it belonged to a customer's daughter. The mud? From a field job near Ridgway Creek. The hair? Could have been there forever. His tone was calm, almost too calm. Deputy Voss leaned forward, voice low. "Danny, a 14-year-old girl vanished. Her DNA is in your van. That's not a coincidence." Cole looked at her, unblinking. "You're assuming she's dead." The room went silent. "Why would you say that?" Mercer asked. Cole leaned back, eyes cold. "Because you're digging in the wrong place." He didn't elaborate. And for the next 6 hours, he refused to speak again. By nightfall, the search of his property uncovered nothing else. No body. No clothing. No sign of Nicole. Just the van, the hair, the earring, and the rag, enough for suspicion, but not enough for conviction. Mercer stood outside the garage long after everyone else left, the autumn wind rattling loose metal signs. His gut told him Danny Cole knew more than he was saying. But what if he was right? What if they were digging in the wrong place? The next morning, search dogs were deployed again, this time beyond Cole's property, toward the dense patch of woodland near Ridgway Creek, a mile north of the old mill road. And that's where everything changed. As dawn broke, one of the dogs began barking frantically at the edge of a clearing. Deputies rushed over, flashlights sweeping through the fog. There, half buried in the dirt, was something that would reopen the entire case, and turn the town's fear into full-blown hysteria. By the time dawn broke over Merrow Creek County, the once quiet town was already buzzing. News vans lined the old service road, their antennas piercing the gray morning sky. Deputies guarded the perimeter of Royce Harlan's property, a rundown farmhouse on the outskirts of town. The same man who'd fixed people's brakes and patched up their lawnmowers was now sitting in the back of a patrol car, staring out the window with a hollow look in his eyes. Inside the farmhouse, Sheriff Mercer stood near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. The place smelled of oil, rust, and loneliness. "He lived here all by himself?" one deputy asked. Mercer nodded slowly. "For years. Said he liked the quiet. Guess now we all wonder what that quiet was hiding." Outside, crime scene techs were combing through Royce's detached garage, a wide, cluttered structure that looked more like an old mechanic's shop than a personal workspace. Rusted parts hung from the rafters. A single bulb flickered overhead, throwing shadows across workbenches littered with tools. Then one of the techs called out, "Sheriff, you're gonna want to see this." On the floor, beneath a tarp, lay a large sealed plastic container. When they pried it open, the smell hit first, something damp, chemical, and faintly organic. Inside were several items wrapped in cloth, a blue denim jacket, a pair of white sneakers, and a silver cross necklace tangled in the fabric. Mercer froze. He'd seen those items before, in photos Diane Summers had given him just 2 weeks ago. Nicole's favorite jacket, the one she wore the night she disappeared. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the sound of rain tapping on the tin roof filled the space. Then Mercer whispered, "Bag everything. Carefully." Back at the sheriff's office, Royce sat in the interrogation room. The walls were bare, save for a single buzzing light. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched a paper cup of water. Mercer entered, setting the evidence bag on the table, the denim jacket inside, stained and weathered. "Royce," the sheriff said, voice low, "we found this in your garage. You want to tell me why Nicole Summers' jacket was buried under a tarp in your shop?" Royce didn't look up at first. His jaw tightened, and his breathing hitched. Then he spoke, voice cracking. "I didn't hurt that girl, Sheriff. I swear to you, I didn't." Mercer leaned forward. "Then how do you explain this?" Royce shook his head, tears filling his eyes. "She came by once. Months before she went missing. Said her car was acting up. You can ask around, people saw her here. She forgot the jacket. I tried to return it, but she never came back." To the deputies watching behind the glass, it sounded like a weak excuse. But Mercer, after 30 years in law enforcement, could tell the difference between fear and deception. And this sounded like genuine terror. Still, the evidence didn't lie. When Diane Summers was told about the discovery, she broke. Her husband Tom stood beside her, arms stiff at his sides, face ashen. "Are you saying that's all you've found?" he asked quietly. Mercer hesitated. "For now. We're still searching the property." That night, a storm rolled across Merrow Creek. Deputies worked under floodlights as thunder echoed through the hills. Near the edge of Royce's land, behind a collapsed tool shed, a cadaver dog stopped and began to dig. Within minutes, the team unearthed something else, a small wooden box, wrapped in black plastic. Inside were personal effects, an old disposable camera, a keychain shaped like a star, and a torn photograph of Nicole at the church pantry, smiling with her friends. But the most disturbing part wasn't what was found, it was what was missing. There were no fingerprints on any of it. Not even Royce's. When Mercer confronted him with the new find, Royce's demeanor broke completely. He buried his face in his hands. "I knew they'd find something," he muttered. "Who's they, Royce?" Mercer pressed. But Royce didn't answer. He only whispered, "You think you know this town, Sheriff, but you don't." To this day, that sentence would haunt Mercer more than any confession could have. The next morning, the media storm hit. Local outlets plastered Royce Harlan's mugshot across every screen. Headlines read, "Local mechanic linked to Summers case." People who'd once trusted him refused to say his name out loud. But behind the scenes, something didn't sit right with Mercer. The tire tracks near the ditch, the missing camera footage, the fact that Nicole's jacket had no trace of blood, it all felt too clean. Almost planted. He rechecked the timeline, the witness statements, everything. And then he found it, a small detail from the original report. A woman had called dispatch the night Nicole vanished, claiming she saw a blue van turning off Mill Road, the same road that led toward Royce's property. The call had never been logged properly. When Mercer pulled the tape, his stomach turned cold. The voice on the recording was panicked, trembling, but clear. It wasn't just a passerby. It was someone he knew. And that's where the section ends, with Sheriff Mercer realizing that the night Nicole Summers vanished, someone close to the family had made a call that was quietly buried, and possibly, deliberately ignored. For months, everyone believed the mystery of Nicole Summers ended with a quiet mechanic and a denim jacket. But what they didn't know, what they weren't supposed to know, was that one phone call could rewrite everything the town thought it understood about that night. By late November 2007, the case had gone cold. The leaves had fallen, the harvest was long done, and the town of Ashcroft County had sunk into an uneasy silence. The Summers porch light still burned every night, a beacon for a daughter who never came home. People stopped talking about hope, but they hadn't stopped thinking about Nicole. Not really. Then, a small mistake cracked the case open again. Sheriff Mercer was reviewing old evidence logs in the county archive when he noticed an entry marked audio file, October 22, 07, source unknown. It had been logged, then buried, misfiled under property evidence. Mercer frowned. That date was 3 days after Nicole vanished. The file was a 911 call, short, only 42 seconds. Static bled through the first few seconds before a trembling female voice came in. The caller said she saw someone who looked like Nicole near the edge of Ridgeview Quarry, 20 miles south of town. She said the girl wasn't alone. Then the call cut off mid-sentence. No name, no follow-up. It was never logged in the case file. Mercer replayed it over and over, trying to place the voice. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone from town. Someone who knew the Summers. That realization hit him like ice. Through long nights and countless church fundraisers, one name came up again and again, Lydia Carr, the Summers neighbor for nearly 2 decades. She'd been one of Diane's closest friends, often dropping off baked goods or helping during harvest. And now, listening closely, Mercer was almost certain the voice was hers. But Lydia Carr had vanished from Ashcroft 2 weeks after Nicole. Quietly. No missing person report, no goodbye. She told people she was visiting family in Indiana, then never came back. At first, Mercer thought coincidence. Then he checked the dispatch record. The call had come from a landline registered to the Carr residence. And that changed everything. The next morning, Mercer visited the old farmhouse. The place stood silent, shutters loose in the wind, yard overgrown. Inside, the rooms looked frozen in time, dishes still on the counter, calendar stuck on October 2007. The phone sat on the wall, cord dangling, dust coating the receiver. He felt a chill crawl up his neck. Something was wrong here. He brought in a forensic team. They found faint footprints in the back hallway, recently, maybe within a few days. Someone had been here. But not Lydia. Not recently enough. The investigation reignited like dry tinder. Reporters returned. Theories spread. Was Lydia the second victim? A witness silenced before she could tell what she saw. Or had she run because she knew what happened that night? The Summers didn't know any of this yet. Sheriff Mercer didn't want to tell them until he was sure. He'd seen too many families crushed by false hope. Still, Diane noticed the change. The sheriff had that look again, the one he'd worn the first week Nicole vanished. That mix of determination and quiet dread. By December, rumors were everywhere. Some said Lydia Carr had confessed before she left. Others whispered she'd been seen boarding a bus to St. Louis. But the truth was simpler and darker. On December 17th, Mercer ordered the quarry searched. Ridgeview had been closed since 2003, but locals still used the service road for hunting. The team found fragments of tire tracks matching an old Chevy work van, the same kind witnesses had reported near the bus stop. They also found a single object lodged near a drainage culvert, a denim jacket button, small, rusted, and engraved with the initials NS. Nicole Summers. Mercer stood there for a long time, the wind biting at his face. It wasn't proof. But it was something that shouldn't have been there, 20 miles from where she vanished. He ordered the area sealed. Drones mapped every inch. Divers searched the flooded quarry pit, pulling up debris, scrap metal, a rusted toolbox, fragments of what looked like burned fabric. But no body. No sign of Lydia. Still, something about the 911 call gnawed at Mercer. The fear in the woman's voice wasn't panic, it was recognition. Whoever she saw near that quarry, she knew them. And then came the part almost no one heard about. The audio tech who cleaned up the tape found a faint sound in the background of the call. 2 words, distorted but unmistakable. A man's voice, low, urgent. He said, "Get back inside." Mercer replayed it 10 times. The voice wasn't Royce Harlan's. It was calm, controlled, almost familiar. But from where? As the snow fell that winter, Ashcroft County seemed to close in on itself. People locked doors now. Kids no longer walked home from school. And somewhere between grief and fear, Diane Summers began to sense that the truth, whatever it was, wasn't buried out in those fields. It was closer. Too close. Late one night, Mercer received a voicemail from an unlisted number. Just static at first, then a woman's whisper, "Stop looking." He froze, replayed it. The voice was the same as the 911 call. Lydia Carr was alive. And she didn't want to be found. That night, Mercer sat alone in his office, the tape recorder still running. He stared at Nicole's missing poster tacked to the wall, the same photo that had haunted every gas station and grocery store for 16 years. And in that moment, he realized something that made his stomach drop. The original 911 call hadn't just been made near the quarry. The background static? It matched the exact interference pattern from police band radios used that night, on the Summers Road. Lydia Carr hadn't called from Ridgeview Quarry. She'd called from somewhere much closer, possibly within sight of the Summers home. Which meant Nicole might have never made it to the quarry at all. And if Lydia knew that, maybe that's why she disappeared. Because sometimes in small towns, the people closest to you don't just keep your secrets, they bury them. Winter in Ashcroft County hung heavy over the rolling hills, blanketing the fields in cold silence. Snow drifted across the Summers farmhouse, leaving icy shadows along the empty roads. For weeks, the town had waited, holding its breath over a girl who had vanished in broad daylight. Every whispered conversation, every glance down a deserted lane, was a reminder that something was terribly wrong. Inside the sheriff's office, Royce Harlan sat across from Sheriff Mercer. The man looked smaller somehow, weighed down by months of public suspicion, personal guilt, and fear. His hands were shaking constantly, and his eyes were rimmed red, reflecting a combination of exhaustion and remorse. There was no arrogance, no defiance, only the raw weight of conscience. Mercer placed the evidence from Royce's property, the denim jacket, the small items, the fragments of Nicole's belongings, in front of him. "Royce," he said quietly, "we need the truth. We know you were involved somehow. People are scared. The family deserves answers. Tell us everything you know about Nicole. Royce swallowed hard, voice shaking. I didn't mean to hurt her. I was trying to protect her. He looked down, fighting back tears. I thought I could keep her safe from the wrong people. I made choices, terrible choices, but I never wanted to. His voice broke. From who? From what? Mercer asked, leaning forward. Royce couldn't answer. His hands trembled over the table. I moved her. I thought she'd be safe. I didn't know where to take her, I didn't know who to trust, and then she was gone from my hands before I could fix it. Mercer studied him. He could see genuine fear in Royce's eyes, but there were no clear answers. No location, no assurances of safety. Just fragments, half-truths, and remorse. It was enough to reopen the investigation, but not enough to bring closure. Outside the sheriff's office, Diane and Tom Summers waited, bundled against the biting winter wind. Their hands were clasped tightly, knuckles white, hearts hammering. Mercer hesitated to bring them in, knowing the confession might give them hope, or break them all over again. When they entered, Royce was still slumped in the chair, head bowed. Diane's eyes searched his face for something, a clue, a reassurance, anything, but there was nothing. The room felt heavy with unspoken truths. Mercer explained that Royce had confessed, that he had knowledge of what had happened, but the critical details about Nicole's location remained unknown. The air was thick with tension, grief, and the bitter sting of uncertainty. Diane sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands, tears sliding down her cheeks. Tom leaned against the wall, jaw tight, staring at the floor as if the cold tiles could hold him together. They had heard Royce's words. They had heard about his remorse. But Nicole was still out there somewhere. For Mercer, it was both a breakthrough and a nightmare. He had finally gotten someone to talk, someone who had been deeply involved, but the confession didn't solve the central tragedy. Nicole Summers remained missing. Every detail Royce provided raised more questions than answers. The roads he had traveled, the safe houses he had used, the people he had avoided, all pieces of a puzzle that still refused to be completed. Outside the office, Ashcroft County felt smaller and quieter than ever. Neighbors whispered about Royce Harlan and the Summers family. Windows stayed closed. Children walked in pairs, always watching. The town had learned that danger could hide behind familiar faces: the neighbor, the handyman, the friend. And then there was Lydia Carr, the neighbor who had made the original 911 call. Her voice had led Mercer to Royce, revealing hints that no one else had seen. Yet she remained elusive, alive but unreachable, like a shadow on the edges of the town. No address, no forwarding contact, no sign she wanted to be found. Mercer couldn't shake the thought that she held more answers, possibly the final pieces of the story, but she remained beyond reach. Mercer thought back to that first day at the bus stop, to the empty road, the watching cornfields, and the sound of a young girl's footsteps that vanished into nothing. The truth, he realized, was not tidy. Closure would not come easily. It might never come. The confession had illuminated the darkness a little, but it hadn't cleared it. The parents left the office that day carrying a mixture of fragile hope and unbearable uncertainty. They had learned that someone had tried to protect their daughter, that a familiar face had held the keys to her fate, but the girl herself was still missing. Every mile of road she had walked alone, every shadow in the trees, every quiet corner of the county remained a reminder of what they did not know. Mercer returned to the office, alone, replaying Royce's words in his mind. The man's trembling hands, the crack in his voice, the sheer weight of regret, it was all human, all real. Yet, the hard truth was that confessions could not undo months of disappearance. They could not bring Nicole Summers back. And somewhere, out there in Ashcroft County, or perhaps beyond it, Nicole walked unseen. A girl whose story had captivated the town, whose absence had left a wound in every neighbor's heart, remained missing. Sheriff Mercer looked out the window, snow falling silently on the empty streets. In the quiet, he understood the cruel reality. Some stories don't end neatly. Some mysteries linger, shaping the lives of everyone left behind, long after the spotlight has moved on. He returned to his desk and picked up the audio of Lydia Carr's 911 call once more, letting it play on repeat. The static crackled, the faint whisper of fear still evident. Mercer sighed. He knew he had learned more than he had before, but it was only more pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. And that is where the story ends, not with a reunion, not with relief, but with a truth harder to accept. Nicole Summers was still missing, and Ashcroft County would live with the uncertainty forever. For the Summers family, every day remained a question. Every empty road, every quiet room, a reminder that some disappearances don't conclude, and some mysteries never give their final answer. 16 years later, the cornfields around Ashcroft County still whisper her name. Royce Harlan's confession answered some questions, but not the one that mattered most. Where is Nicole Summers? The searches have long ended. The news crews have moved on. But her parents still leave the porch light on every night, just in case their daughter finds her way back home. Sheriff Mercer retired 5 years ago. He still keeps Nicole's file on his desk, not as a case, but as a promise. "We don't close what's unfinished," he once said. Some stories don't end. They linger. They haunt. They remind us how fragile ordinary moments can be, how a simple walk home can become a mystery that outlives everyone who remembers it. If you've watched this far, thank you. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people, and keeps their memory alive. Drop a comment below. What do you think really happened to Nicole Summers? Until next time, keep your doors locked and your lights on. Because sometimes, the most terrifying mysteries don't begin in the dark, they begin in the daylight.